LinkedIn presents.
Our most important skill set, like by a mile, is how can you multiply your abilities by connecting with other people?
I'm Rufus Griscom, and this is The Next Big Idea. Today, how to build a great culture.
Hi, I'm Diana. My association with Wipro goes back to September 2004, when I first set foot into the Calcutta location of Wipro BPO.
So this is a clip from a promotional video from a company called Wipro.
What I love most being a part of Wipro family is that you get to experiment, work hard, and party harder.
Experiment, work hard, and party harder. With a motto like that, you might think Wipro is some kind of cool tech startup, but no. It's a call center. A nice one, though. The telephone headset-wearing employees are all smiles. They give out a lot of air high fives. There's even a shot of a woman applauding herself. You gotta keep on dreaming big. Because party harder is one of Wipro's core values, they have an employee engagement program that's named Josh. Apparently, employees, or Wiproites as they're called, get to play ping pong at work. They also go to raves and compete to be crowned Mr. and Mrs. Josh in the company beauty pageant. Wipro has all the trappings of a fun place to work. But back in 2010, right around the time this video was posted online, all was not well at the call center. Despite offering competitive salaries, despite the ping pong tournaments and beauty pageants, Wiproites were quitting like crazy. Some years, 70% of employees walked off the job. The company responded by boosting pay and adding new perks like, foosball or maybe another beauty pageant. But it didn't work. So the head honchos took another approach. They partnered with some management researchers and ran a little experiment. They took a few hundred new hires and split them into two groups. On day one, the first group got the usual newbie training. Then they spent an hour learning about Wipro's identity. They met a star performer, were quizzed on the company's culture, and at the end of the session, they got a Wipro-branded fleece sweatshirt. The second group attended the same newbie training, but then, instead of learning about how great Wipro was, they spent an hour answering questions about themselves. Stuff like, what's unique about you that leads to your happiest times and best performances at work? After that, they also got sweatshirts, only these had their names embroidered right alongside the Wipro logo. Fast forward 7 months, new hires from that second group were 250% more likely to still be at Wipro. 250%. And all it took was a custom sweatshirt. Well, that and showing them how their personal skills would be valued at Wipro, inviting them to imagine a future where they belonged at this company. Because fostering that sense of belonging, more than any beauty pageant, goes a long way towards creating a strong, connected culture. That story comes from a great book, a modern classic, The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. It was one of our very first winners here at the Next Big Idea Club back in 2018, and its lessons have stuck with me ever since. We know that great cultures feel good. We all want to be part of them. But we also tend to think that great cultures just happen. Take a cool company, hire the best people, and maybe you'll get lucky. But after studying some of the most successful organizations around, from the film nerds at Pixar to the ultra badasses on SEAL Team 6, Dan has found that having a productive culture isn't a fluke, it's a skill. And like any skill, you've got to work at it. Dan has figured out a bunch of easy, practical things you can do to improve your company's culture or your family's. And these practical moves are at the heart of his brand new book, The Culture Playbook. We hear from Dan in this conversation that great cultures are not always fun, not always comfortable, but they are always worth it. We'll hear why CEOs are learning to cry on command. He'll take us into the Golden State Warriors locker room and tell us how the team's film intern figured out how to defend LeBron. And he'll explain how a team of kindergartners beat a team of MBA students in an engineering competition. Ever since I first read The Culture Code, I've been trying out some of Dan's tips at work and at home. My conclusion? Dan is absolutely right. Great cultures don't just feel good, they perform better.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite, obey your thirst.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
Daniel Coyle, welcome to the Next Big Idea podcast.
Rufus, thanks so much for having me. It's really fun to be here with you.
So great to have you on the show. So your story, Dan, just fascinates me. You were a youngster with a passion for baseball. Your aspiration was to play shortstop for the Cardinals. It didn't quite work out that way, but now you live this kind of colorful life, as I imagine it anyway, spending your winters in Cleveland, Ohio, and your summers in Alaska. Can you tell us what kind of led you to this moment?
Well, I can tell you one of the things that stopped me on my journey to become the shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals was the fact that I was growing up in Alaska. No big leaguer has ever grown up in Alaska, and kind of made this left turn from sort of wanting to be a great performer to studying great performers.
And you've gotten in this time to not only do some kind of deep study on what makes individuals and groups successful, but you've also got to work with some of the great sports teams, right? I think you currently work with the Cleveland Guardians. Is that right?
That was kind of the thing. Baseball never called me, but then one day they did. They had read some of my stuff, and of course, the Cleveland Guardians are this small market team. They're not the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Dodgers. They can't buy talent. They have to build it. And so they're keenly interested in getting the most out of people. And I'm going to brag on their behalf. For the last 10 years, they've got, I think, the second best record in the American League, and they've spent $900 million less than the Yankees. So
wow.
Adding up to more, developing more talent, and it's really fun. I know you deal with a lot of writers. I got to say, I've really enjoyed the relationship, which is about 9 years now with the Guardians. I go down there one day a week and kind of hang around and chat about this stuff. But as a writer, it's kind of fun to be plugged into a bigger group. As writers, we're often like in our little Sputniks circling the planet, and this lets me land and hang out with others.
And that's a great example of the fact that culture and the difference between a good culture and a less good culture is measurable and powerful, right? I mean, we see it in the numbers. This is something that really changes organizations, changes people's lives.
It makes people add up to more. And people sort of used to think culture is, hey, it's just this kind of vibe, right? It's a nice feel. There's a Harvard study. They tracked identical companies, very similar companies, over 11 years. And one of the pair had strong culture, one had weak culture. And the difference in net revenue over 11 years was 756%. So like the Guardians, good cultures make people add up to more because you're interacting in a way that brings out the potential and the smarts and the motivation in everyone.
Well, let's get into your latest book, Dan, The Culture Playbook. You wrote a book called The Talent Code in 2009, a big bestseller. Subtitle was Greatness Isn't Born, It's Grown, all about how we can unlock talent. Then in 2018, you came out with The Culture Code, which was about how to build great cultures. You now have a follow-up book, fresh off the presses, called The Culture Playbook. How do you think about the relationship between individual talent, right, which you've written about extensively, and collective talent as a group?
Those two mysteries, like what is individual talent made of? That drove my first book. That book took me into these spaces where I was seeing individuals combine to create something more. And when you think about it, it's actually a really common experience. You walk into a school and it feels different, right? There's something going on there that's kind of cool. Or maybe you go into a locker room in sports, or maybe you go to a tech company, or maybe it's a family, maybe it's a bakery. But we know that there are certain places in our life where things feel differently because of the interactions in those places. And we have all this like language to talk about that, right? We say, oh, there's great chemistry there, or what, there's a good feel, whatever that might be. And it feels like magic because both on the kind of individual talent and also on the collective talent, these are some of the peak experiences of life, developing skills as an individual or being part of this team. And I think they are both sort of connected because they look like magic from a distance, right? You see an individual perform at an incredibly high level. It looks like magic. Mozart, Michael Jordan, it's magical. But then when you really get close to it, what you find out is that it's built from a series of activities and behaviors and actions and environments. And with group talent, or culture, we'll call it, it's exactly the same pattern where you've got like, man, that looks magical what they're doing. That team that wins every year and everybody's very selfless. From a distance, we sort of take it as part of their identity, right? They're just better than we are. They're just smarter than we are. But actually, when you zoom in and x-ray it a little bit and look at the behaviors and look at the environments, what you find is a fingerprint. You find this pattern that recurs over and over again because our brains, despite the fact that we love believing in stories about magic, our brains are actually built to grow and connect in these very systematic, process-centric ways. And so the books are kind of about those systems and processes that create magic.
Well, your journey going from sort of a focus on individual development to group development is one that I can relate with because I found that in my own life, I went to a high school where we were all ranked 1 to 84. It was, and that's not an environment where it's easy to be cheerleading for the team, right?
Yeah.
But one of my favorite kind of emergent ideas in the course of hosting this podcast, we've now done over 100 conversations with all kinds of extraordinary thinkers, is this idea that maybe all success is group success.
Yeah.
That maybe we sometimes give all the credit to a single individual, right? That Steve Jobs single-handedly made these extraordinary computers and phones, or Elon Musk single-handedly caused a rocket to land standing up.
Right.
But we know that, in fact, that's not the way that people succeed, right? And I've come to believe that the mythology of individual genius and solitary accomplishment does us a disservice, and that it's really liberating just to say, you know what? Wherever we succeed in our lives, whether it's in our personal lives or in business or wherever we have great gratification and great success, it's always a team that makes that happen. Does that resonate for you? Yeah.
100%. And we've got, I couldn't agree with it more. And we've got some really beautiful cautionary tales around that.
Yes.
Let's see. Theranos, Uber. Every time that we anoint someone as having something special and there's something different about them and they're really smarter than everybody else, it turns out that we're wrong. Right. So the problem actually isn't with them. It's with our tendency to mythologize as we have. And whenever you look deeper into a successful venture, whatever that might be, you always find deeply human connections that are not made up of kind of transactional relationships. They're made up of meaning and purpose and a sense of safety and belonging. And you keep seeing that pattern. And it is quite liberating because I think it opens us up. The great paradox of today is that just like your high school, everybody is educated individually, hired individually, assessed individually, promoted individually, thinks of themselves individually.
Yep.
And yet, in fact, our most important skill set, like by a mile, is how can you multiply your abilities by connecting with other people?
Yeah, exactly. And the huge difference, and this is on the short list of things that I would like to be able to tell my younger self, of discoveries I've had in the last 30 years or so, is if it ends up being true that we succeed in groups, we really accomplish everything that matters in life as part of teams of people, that means that we don't have to be good at everything. And that is such a liberating feeling, right? And that's not how a lot of us grow up. I mean, that's not the understanding that we're necessarily teaching our children.
Big time. And it's so true. It really is deeply true. That is all of this. That's the thing about a lot of this research that I got to say personally, I've enjoyed the most, having spent the last 15 to 20 years immersed in this area of success and performance and continually examining it in all of its different incarnations. The more you learn about it, the more mellow it makes you, which is kind of weird. You would think that it would make you sort of more focused and more rigorous. And you actually find this too in life as you look at people who are in positions of great success. They mostly get mellower as you go. They're mostly often a little more well-rounded, a little more comfortable in their own skin, a little better at relationships. That's not true with everybody, but it's true with a lot of people. And I think it's because we've all kind of keyed into that same deep truth, which is it's not about us. And that's kind of a bummer when you're young. Oh, it's not about me. And it's kind of great news when you're older. Like, hey, it's not about me. That's really great.
Another thing that I love about your work, Dan, is that I find that even though it's largely directed towards sort of business objectives and team sports objectives, and we all have a pressing need to figure out how to build effective cultures to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But I find that this is every bit as relevant to how to approach marriage, how to approach family, how to approach your relationship with your friends, right? Really, these learnings, I think, are applicable to all areas of our lives.
No, you're on to me. That's been my secret agenda all along in some ways. It's like, how do I figure out to be better at some of that stuff? Because it's really true, and the most vivid example I can think of is a question that most parents ask their children when they come home from school. And we probably all know what that question is, right? You're sitting around the dinner table and you ask a question.
What did you do in school today? Right?
How was your day? Right.
How was your day?
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Yeah.
You asked that.
Yeah.
And that question actually historically has never led to a good conversation in history. Like in the history of the planet, there's never been a moment where the kid was like, wow, thanks for asking me that. Let me really tell you everything. Like that's never, ever, ever. And so what I learned by spending time with these groups and looking at the real dynamics and processes of great culture is it's better to start with vulnerability, like you start with fallibility. So instead of asking that question, you share something that you screwed up that day. And you will be shocked at how much that simple flip from, hey, it's about me, I'm going to be the authoritative parent, and I ask the question that my parents asked, to like, hey, I'm going to do a little different thing here, and how that can really energize and open up a family conversation in a new way. So I couldn't agree more. This is about what it's like to be a good human being and connect to other human beings.
Well, the blank faces of our children around the dinner table is definitely a problem to be solved. So I think this is a great service to all the listeners here who have kids. So why don't we start at the beginning? The first section is about building safety.
Yeah.
And I think it's no accident that this is where you start the book. Why is this so important?
Well, it is the foundation of everything that is to come. If you do not, as a group, like any living entity, right? Your culture of your group is a living thing that moves and breathes and moves certain directions and shares information like every other living thing on the planet. And if you don't have that basic level of safety, then you don't have that foundation on which everything can happen. It's the root system of the tree. It's the skeleton of the animal that your group is. And so that's why it is so titanically important. You can get your purpose right. You can get all kinds of information sharing right. You can have all the right data. But if people don't feel safe, if they don't feel like, hey, I really share a future with these people and I have a voice here, right? And I think that's one of the things that Amy Edmondson really taught me. She's a pioneer of psychological safety. Professor at Harvard. And one of the things that she's really good at explaining that I think a lot of people get wrong about safety, they sort of think that safety is about safety, right? That it's about feeling very secure. And what Amy does a great job of explaining is a deeper truth. Safety is not about safety. Safety is about voice. Safety is about feeling free when you feel like the boss has made a bad decision and you're the intern, raising your hand and saying, I have a question. Right? I'm not sure about this. And groups where the intern can do that are smarter and better and more connected and they function better. So safety isn't like some add-on. It's absolutely essential. And so this idea that building safety comes first is because sort of in the process of it and in our own brains, we've got these very active areas that are continually worried about, do I fit in here? Do these people really like my work? Do they like me? Should I stay here? And so smart groups send what I call belonging cues. They're continually sending these really clear signals of, hey, you have a voice here. I'm curious. Help poke some holes in my plan. Help me out here. And you see that, all the time. And they're little moments where you're giving people voice, but they might be the most important moments you have.
And I love this observation that you've made, that this question that we're all asking in our heads without realizing it, is this group accepting me? Do I have a future with this group? Do I feel love and connection and belonging? This is so deeply primal, right? We can't get rid of it. And probably it comes from the fact that back in our ancestral environment, tens of thousands of years ago, to be rejected by the group would probably result in death, right? I mean, it was life-threatening. So when we think about why is it that a 14-year-old, when they see signs that they might be on the outs in their clique in high school, they read this as a literally life-threatening situation. And of course, it's not life-threatening at all. There are lots of other groups of friends they could make, and they're going to be fine.
Right.
But the fact that it feels life-threatening is really important. And you know what? Even when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, it still feels life-threatening. And this is why, as you make this point repeatedly in all kinds of different ways, that we have to be so persistent and creative in finding ways to convince people that this group is accepting you. You do have a future in this group,
right?
And we belong together.
Endless creativity and endless persistence with that message. It's not something you can send once and then say, "Oh, we're safe now. We're good." Yeah. And one of the psychologists I talked to said, "Hey, how many times do you tell your wife you love her?" That was the way he put it. You can't just say it once. It's good to repeat. And all human beings are that same way. I mean, one of my favorite stories of the power of this is something around, I think it's called the Spaghetti Challenge. And there's a guy named Peter Skillman, and he decided to investigate this question of why certain groups add up to more. And he did it through a contest. And the contest is who can build the tallest tower with 20 pieces of raw spaghetti, a yard of Scotch tape, and then one standard marshmallow. And the only rule is the marshmallow has to be on the top. And so he got teams of CEOs, teams of lawyers, teams of MBA students, and teams of kindergartners. And ready, set, go. Everybody starts to build. And all the adult teams start the same way. They talk, right? And someone will have an idea. Someone, I used to build things, and here's my idea. And then other people will hone that idea, and then they'll divide up into roles, and they'll start building. And it looks like beautiful. It looks really cooperative. It looks perfect. The kindergartners don't do that, actually. They just basically get in a big pile and they eat all the marshmallows except for one. And then they start just building in a totally chaotic way, like hand over hand, arm over arm, jamming stuff together in a chaotic way. And if you had to bet which team would win, most of us would bet on one of the adult teams, because that's our mental model of group performance. We focus on what we can see. And when we see smooth, intelligent cooperation, we assume it's going to add up into good performance. And when we see chaos, we assume it's going to add up into bad performance. But we're wrong, because the kindergartners win all the time.
I love that.
Not because they're smarter, but because they're safer. The adult teams are interacting, but in the back of their minds, and they can barely feel it, but is this question of who's in charge here? I don't really know these people. Can I say that? Can I give feedback to that person? And that brain activity just steals time, steals energy, steals attention, steals feedback, diminishes performance. And kindergartners who nobody cares, who's the CEO of Spaghetti Incorporated, what better way to build something than to get shoulder to shoulder and try stuff?
I love that story. And I I actually think I may have to invest in, 20 strands of spaghetti and a yard of tape and some marshmallows to try this experiment at home, because it's just fantastic. And I'd love to see, there must be videos of this, right? I'd love to see the CEOs and the attorneys and the little collection of kindergartners. But the status maintenance is deeply distracting. And part of that is about fundamentally people not feeling safe, I imagine.
That's right. And we're built that way. It's very distracting, and it's very just built into our software, which is why a strong culture will view those first 5 minutes you spend together as really important. And that first disagreement, that's a really important moment. And then that first learning you have, it's really important. So establishing those norms, over communicating safety, over communicating that in a way that creates voice, in a way that lets people know that their voice is not just needed, but incredibly impactful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love all the practical suggestions you have in this book about how we can accomplish this and how we can accomplish it in an age when many of us are working remotely, right? Which adds a whole nother twist, right? Because a lot of the ways we're accustomed to building safety are through the kind of body language and interpersonal connection you have face to face. Hopefully we can get that. But how do you think about how to do that effectively in a remote culture?
Well, there's a few tips that were really helpful, I think, in that area. One of them was given to me by a Navy SEAL commander who he said, hey, your face is like a door. It can be closed or it can be open. We kind of know what closed looks like your brow is down and you're focused, right? You have a tight spotlight of attention. Open is when your eyebrows are up and your eyes are wide open and it's called your frontalis muscle, the one right above your eyebrows. And it's kind of interesting because it's got no survival function. It doesn't help you live. It helps you communicate. It's the main billboard that we use to signal curiosity, excitement, engagement. And think of the faces of the leaders you admire. Think of the faces of the leaders who you connect with. Are they closed or are they open? And that Navy SEAL commander, especially in this age of hybrid, really clued me into, I think, the power of facial expression in that little stage. That said, we are not built to connect through glass. We are not built to connect through a tiny picture, postage stamp size of ourselves. I think one of the core things that groups are navigating is exactly what you put a spotlight on, which is it's really hard to develop a relationship when you're not physically together. And so a lot of groups are taking this toggling approach where they'll seek short times of physical togetherness with longer periods of virtual co-working. And there's a company called Airspeed where every 6 weeks they'll pick a cool place to go. And they gather in that place and they will do their most creative work. They'll tackle hard problems together. And then they all fly back to their homes and work from there for 6 weeks and then come back together. And I think those sort of experiments are really worth paying attention to now and doing your own experiments in that area.
Yeah.
What's going to emerge from here is not going to be some recipe book that will just automatically give everybody will follow. Everyone's work is a little different. Every group works a little differently. And so having those conversations around, hey, how are we going to work together? How are we going to do this? End up being some of the most powerful, impactful conversations you can have right now.
And I think it's also useful to be aware of what we are best at and least effective at when we're having these remote work experiences. I think a lot of us, I've certainly had some time in the last couple of years of thinking oh gosh, this is great. I can get a lot done.
Yep.
People aren't tapping me on the shoulder. But you point out that we're effective at kind of doing routine work and checking things off lists when we're working remotely, but less effective at more creative work. Right. And if we can understand those sort of strengths and weaknesses of these different modes of working, I think that's quite empowering.
Exactly right. Putting these works in kind of different buckets. And there was an interesting study about engineers trying to solve a hard problem. And it turned out that the engineers who were physically present with each other talked about the problem 8 times more often.
So interesting.
So they surface new solutions. But it's on your mind together. It's on the collective brain together. And being intentional, that's what the pandemic has done, right? It's raised the bar a little bit for you can't just sort of smush everybody together and say, go do your work. You actually have to pause. And that skill of pausing, I mean, it's funny, the book is called The Culture Playbook, but I think it could easily be called The Culture Pause Book. Because pausing is the new productivity. We live in this world where everything is coming at us and there is this incredible expectation and tempo to our thoughts and actions where things come in and things got to get sailed out again. Boom, boom, boom. And what good cultures do, I think, is get off that treadmill and be very intentional about, okay, how are we going to work together on this? Let's talk about that. How are we doing? What would you change about how we're working together? And creating those productive pauses. And it's useful to sort of conceptualize learning as a loop, right? You have experience on the top side of the loop, and then you've got reflection. In our modern world, underrates and diminishes and shrinks our reflective capacity and our reflective time. And good cultures expand it and make time for it and create conversations around it. And so that goes for both individuals and for groups. Like carving out that time. I think the most important decisions in life, they don't happen when you're full in the action, right? They happen when you're reflecting. All the big stuff in your life happens through reflection, and getting better at it is just one of the most important things you can put energy toward.
So something I've heard you say, Dan, is that the world we live in is a learning contest. It's not an execution contest. It's not a confidence contest. It's a learning contest. And I think that's so powerful, because I think a lot of people probably, one can cynically sometimes feel that the world is a confidence contest, right?
Yeah.
And the difference, and one of the big difference, or an execution contest, and the difference here is when I look back at my own last 25 years of building businesses, I look at the first 10 years of my first business and say, you know what, really maybe 40 to 50% of the work that we did was that which created the impact that we wanted. The other stuff, we were chasing butterflies, or we had the wrong focus. And slowing down and reflecting, as you say, and switching modalities is critical to making better decisions about whether you're applying your efforts in the right direction, making sure that you're processing and learning from the experiences you're having.
God, and it feels so counterproductive. Like, it feels so good to keep going. Like, you
Totally.
finish a project, that feeling, let's click on to the next one. That's just how, I don't know if it's our school system or our culture or whatever, but we all have that powerful instinct. And so it really feels weird, deeply weird to say, okay, we just finished this project. Stop. like, let's talk about what went well. Let's talk about where we screwed up. Let's talk about what we're going to do differently next time. And yet, when you sort of scratch the surface of great cultures, that's exactly what they're doing. Like, that process I just described is an AAR, an after-action review. Why are the SEALs so good? Why do they get picked for so many missions? Why are they so efficient at cooperating? Well, every time they do a training run or an actual mission, they do an AAR. They ask they stop, and they ask those three questions. What did we do well? What should we do differently? And what are we going to do differently next time? And that is just it's so counterintuitive, but once you kind of get used to doing it, and once you clue into the power and the leverage it gives you over your future learnings, it ends up being as essential as like any sort of workout.
Well, before we conclude on this first category, which is building safety, it could be worth mentioning a couple of the other practical tips you have in the book, which I think could be done either whether you're working remotely or in person. One of them that I love is overthanking people. Right, you talk about the Spurs coach Popovich. Right, I love his approach.
Oh, it's tremendous. At the end of every year, he goes up to his players and he says, "Thank you for allowing me to coach you." He's paid, I think, $7 million a year. They're paid at least that, and so he doesn't have to do that. Right? That is kind of crazy. That makes no sense. And yet, from a relational point of view, from a safety point of view, from a belonging point of view, it's such a powerful moment, because being coached by him is not easy, right? And coaching people is not easy. And taking time to acknowledge what the relationship is just such a fundamental lever for creating the kind of connection that drives great culture.
Another one on your list is set aside time to just hang out at work. Right. I think that's a great one. And it's taken me a while to sort of think that was part of a productive team process. It just and you can do that. We do that through our Zoom meetings as well, our weekly meetings. We'll have these sort of updates. What challenges did we have last week? What wins or successes did we have last week? What are we working on? And then we'll have a different personal share every week. Last week it was tell the story of your first car.
Whoa.
Whoa. But every week we do something different, and it is that just hanging out time. And it would appear to be totally unrelated to work, but there is a building of trust and safety, I think.
100%. And most of the things that emerge from that are stories, right?
Yeah.
Your story of your first car, the story of our screw up last week, whatever that might be, or our great triumph last week. Those are all stories. And stories remain like undefeated as the strongest drug ever invented for connecting people and getting their attention and being sticky and memorable. And so to have that hangout time, which is sort of secretly a story factory, right, where we're gonna kind of build our shared history, ends up being just, not like a nice to have, but an essential capacity.
running a business online. Instantly build trust with your customers with a domain and matching professional email from GoDaddy so people know you mean business. And there's never been a better time. Visit GoDaddy.com/GD now and you can get a domain and professional email plan for just 99 cents a month for 1 year. That's a little price for a lot of credibility. Choose the domain that's right for you and a professional email to match. Go to GoDaddy.com/GD now and look legit. That's GoDaddy.com/GD now. New customer purchases only. Products auto-renew separately. See terms on site. Have you ever called a loved one, gotten their voicemail, and thought, yes, that worked out perfectly? You're getting credit for a genuine act of thoughtfulness. You were thinking of them, trying to connect, and yet the whole thing only took 30 seconds, which was all you had. Well, that's the feeling I'm getting this season, giving Aura frames to both of my siblings, my parents, and a few friends. How can one gift be perfect for all these different people I love? Because you can personalize each Aura frame after it ships. You can deliver photos from anywhere, anytime, right from your phone. The opportunities for humor and personalization are endless. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames named #1 by Wirecutter by using promo code IDEA, IDEA, at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code IDEA. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Okay, so we've successfully built safety here. Let's in this hypothetically, hopefully. I'd like to think
we're so safe right now.
That we're feeling safe, and sharing vulnerability is another level, I guess, right? And this has been a hot topic in recent years. Like Brene Brown talks a lot about it, and there are a lot of leading thinkers who do. Why is this so important, and how do we do it?
Yeah, no, it's true. It has really, it's funny. When I first started researching this, it wasn't quite in the culture as it is now. And it is in the culture in a big way. I actually just came from an event with a big tech company who will remain nameless. And there was a guy who kind of came up to me and he said, there are media consultants that are training CEOs to cry on camera now.
Come on.
That's what he said. He said, I swear to God, I have no reason to believe or disbelieve this guy. He seemed pretty credible. But he said, they'll say, do your statement to the company, but try to bring a little break to your voice this time. So people are actually sort of weaponizing this idea of vulnerability. And so it's worth, as this explodes in our culture, to be a little more discerning about exactly what we're talking about. So what we're actually talking about is not deep personal disclosure and we should all cry at work every day. It is about visibility. It's about giving people visibility into what's really happening. It's about sharing information. The model I have, sort of the mental model for a culture right now, I think, is a flock of birds flying through a forest together, right, at high speed. And there's trees and there's rocks and there's mountains that they have to go around and stay together. They have to stay connected. And in order to do that, you need to share information. You need to be a group brain, and a good group brain is an interconnected group brain where you can see something and trust that it's true. As that flock of birds flies at high speed through this space, there's no way you could have one bird shouting instructions to all the other birds where they should turn and how they should go. Right. You need to share information in real time so that people can self-organize around problems and opportunities and do them. And that's the speed of the world now. It used to be that if you ran a law firm or a factory, you could sort of set up these command and control things, and you didn't need to provide visibility. If people just did their job, you would be successful. But those days are done. David Brooks has a great quote. I think he says, what efficiency was to the Industrial Revolution, relationships are to today.
I love that.
It's deeply true. And the key thing about that relationship is that trust you get from being open. So what you see in strong cultures is a relentless ability to be vulnerable with what's really happening, with information, with telling the truth about, there's that moment where you finish a project and there's a temptation to kind of mark it down as an A and move on. Right? Like that, there's this huge temptation to let's not get vulnerable. Let's not tell the truth about where I screwed up and where you might have screwed up. And good cultures take that time and pause and say, like through the AAR we just talked about, and say, yeah, this is where I think we screwed up.
Yep.
No offense to anybody, but because we're safe here, I can tell you the truth. And so vulnerability and safety work in this wonderful sort of feedback loop. Like the more open you are, the safer you feel, which makes you more open. And so that's why culture is always sort of changing, right? It's not like you ever get on a plateau with your culture or anybody's culture and say, we're done.
Yeah,
it's a living thing. And that vulnerability is so key to that.
Right. And so when we think about vulnerability, we can often think about, like, what just popped in my head was, we could have our next Big Idea Club team all share photos of our awkward preteen years, right? That was just a sort of funny thing that we would do, but it's really not. I mean, sure, you can do that. That might be humorous and fun, but it's about being able to say, I don't understand this. I screwed up. I'm nervous right now about this project or this. What's happening here, right? Is that more the kind of vulnerability we're talking about?
100%. That's exactly what we're talking about. And finding that place where you say, I need help. Helping behavior, it really is a very complex thing to have a group of people and someone slips up over here and someone without being asked will go over and help. That's an extraordinary thing. And that's what happens in good cultures because there is this transparency. For that to happen, the person who screwed up or who needs help needs to signal that in some way, right? That's a risk. And then the other person has to sort of put aside what they're doing and go and take the risk of going to help and hopefully not get rejected. It's very, very complex. And so this continual visibility that smart leaders create by saying, hey, Ed Catmull's one of the best at it, CEO of Pixar.
Yes.
When people get hired at Pixar, whether they're a barista or whether they're a director, they all come into the theater and they all sit in the fifth row because that's, I guess, the best seat. I didn't know that. Movie makers say the fifth row is the best seat.
Okay.
So there's a little tip for all of us. And he says this sentence to them. He says, whatever you did before, you're a movie maker now. We need your help to make our movies better. And then they'll do these sessions where they'll show a movie in progress to the whole group, the whole company, the baristas, everybody.
Wow.
And everybody has an opportunity they call it plussing. I'm not criticizing, I'm adding, right? I'm plussing. And I met a guy there who was like a tech guy, and they had seen an early version of Up when they were working on the movie Up. And this tech guy had an idea for some little secret joke to put in the Boy Scout badges that the Boy Scout was wearing. And they took it. They used the idea in the movie.
I love it.
Extraordinary idea. You're a movie maker now. We need your help. We need your help. And that's a signal that good cultures are continually sending. They're not sending, I got this. They're sending, we need your help.
And this comes back to something you said earlier about safety, empowering voice, right? That we know there are all sorts of studies that show that diverse teams, diverse in terms of age, in terms of expertise, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of everything, are more effective at solving problems. That's only true if everybody feels comfortable expressing their voice and everybody's invited to express their voice, right? Whether they're an intern or whoever they are.
Exactly right. So those little bitty moments where a leader says, hey, what do you think? There was we spend a chunk of our year in Cleveland, and there was a story I read about when the Golden State Warriors were playing the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA Finals a few years ago, and the Warriors were I think it was Game 7 maybe, and the Warriors were struggling defending LeBron. And in a meeting the night before the game, Steve Kerr, the Warriors coach, said, hey, anybody have any ideas? And the film intern suggested something to change the defense, and he used it. And they won. And it's like that moment doesn't get written about. Like we see the headline of all the great shots, but always there's always a moment behind the moment where this voice gets expressed because they were open, that they were safe, and they were willing to take that step forward and share.
So this idea of telling people what you screwed up or what you're not good at or what you don't understand, this would also be on the short list of things I would tell my younger self, and that I attempt to tell my children without success.
Yeah.
Or which is that when you tell people that that you're lousy at certain things, or that, hey, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, I'm really not good at these things, it has the effect of accelerating connection, accelerating trust, and it also opens up learning, right? Because you can't, if you don't tell people you don't understand something or you're not good at something, it's much harder to get them to help you make progress in that area, right? And then the third factor is that it's contagious, that when you acknowledge weakness, you invite others to do the same thing. And so you have accelerated connection, accelerated learning, and, team cohesion.
It's a win-win-win, 100%. And yet it is still hard to do. So you can't normalize it once. You have to kind of continually normalize it. I think for people of our generation who spent most of our young lives like trying to scramble above judgment, like trying to get to a place where where we know everything. And I think a lot of people did spend their time. And there is this, to touch back on your point earlier, this sense of great freedom and liberation in saying, hey, this is really a complex world. Nobody knows everything. Nobody can know everything. It's actually a gift that nobody knows everything. And I think that connects to another related idea that I talk a little bit about in the book, which is around cultural fit and cultural contribution. We typically see culture fit as being a unalloyed good. We hire people for our group because they're a great culture fit. And yet, when you think about it a little more deeply, that ends up creating the worst thing of all, which is a monoculture. We're already biased to hire and like and want to talk to people who talk and look and act like us. So instead, the suggestion is hire for contribution. Don't hire for fit. To your earlier point, a diverse brain is a smarter brain.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people who think in the same pathways is not going to be able to solve the sort of complex problems that we're faced with all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. On the subject of sharing vulnerability on a personal level, just in the last year or two, I've started saying to people in the middle of a conversation, usually in a work environment, I'm sorry, I was having a focus problem. Can you repeat what you just said?
That's really good. Yeah.
Because you know what? Honestly, I've only realized in the last 5 years or so, Dan, that I have a bit of ADD. I prefer to call it a novelty bias, right? That I'm attracted to the new thing. But it means that sometimes the novelty bias leads me to looking across the room and reading the title of a book instead of listening to what I've just been told, right? So I'm 54 years old. Even 5 or 10 years ago, I would not have said, sorry, I was spacing out.
Yeah, that's right.
So why would I not have said that 10 years ago? Maybe because I was afraid of seeming stupid, right? Inadequately attentive, inadequately on the ball.
Yep.
But boy, is it liberating. And people always chuckle and smile. And then I end up being much more sort of engaged in the conversation opposed to floating.
And I love it. It's a vulnerability loop, right? When two people open up like that, you create that connection, you create visibility to figure stuff out together. They're smarter for knowing that about you and can adjust in the future. So we sometimes think of vulnerability as just this like moral thing or this emotional thing, but it's actually about being more aware.
Now, is sharing vulnerability inherently uncomfortable? I mean, I guess sometimes more than others, but I think some element of discomfort might be a sign that we're succeeding in being vulnerable together. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I do. The root word of vulnerability is Latin vuln, which means wound. So it actually, if there's not a little bit of sting, you're not quite doing it right. But the thing is that over time, as you've done, you get kind of adjusted to it. And it's exactly, I guess I would liken it to physical exercise. Like we know that when we exercise to do it properly, there's going to be some pain. And the pain is actually a sign that our bodies are going to compensate by getting stronger. And that's how our bodies are built. That's a really smart system, actually, when you think about it. Like if we stress the body in certain ways, it's going to get stronger in those ways. Well, this is kind of opening up the idea that our social groups are built along the exact same functional principle. Like when we stress in certain ways by being vulnerable together and feeling that pain and feeling that, oh man, I screwed up and I feel terrible. Like I really screwed up. And I'm really tempted not to share it, but I'm going to share it anyway. And you feel that emotional burn. That burn you feel is going to create this compensatory response of closeness, awareness that will improve the group's functioning in the future, just like exercise. So that burn you feel, you get used to it. And you begin, just like with exercise, in a weird way, to kind of crave it. Like, this sounds strange, but in good cultures, if you walk around and all of a sudden, we had a meeting and nobody pointed out any problems. We had a meeting and everyone agreed with everything and every idea was a great idea. Smart cultural leaders, I call it the happy smoothness fallacy. Like, we've got this bias to want everything to be happy and smooth. And we sort of assume that good cultures are happy and smooth and they're great ideas and it's all seashells and balloons. And in fact, good cultures are good because they're having those hard conversations and they're confessing that screw up and they're looking hard at what they're trying to do and poking holes in it and having vivid, energetic disagreements about ideas and letting the best idea win. And doing it in this atmosphere of relational connection and safety.
Yeah, I love that, Dan. If you go to the gym and you don't feel pain, you probably didn't get stronger. If you spend time with people and you're trying to solve problems, trying to do hard things, and you don't feel discomfort in the process, you probably didn't get closer. You probably didn't make the product better. And we develop an appetite for that discomfort in a funny way because we start to see that this corresponds with great outcomes.
100%. And there's a pattern that you see with people with great cultures, and you've probably seen it, which is people will sometimes leave a great culture and then they'll circle back and come back to it. They might leave Pixar and then they'll work their way back to Pixar. They might leave the SEAL team of the San Antonio Spurs, but they'll find their way back because that juice that you get in those places where it's like, man, I'm being radically open we are very uncomfortable at times when we are making these incredible insights and progress together, and being connected to that is a pretty special feeling.
Yeah, we had Ray Dalio on the show recently, and he gets some flack in certain circles for the having built a culture that is, some people find uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But those who come to love it can't go anywhere else, he says, which I think is interesting. And I love your observation that Pixar, you spent time with Ed Catmull. You spent time at Pixar. And you commented that people have in their heads this idea that it's just sort of this exuberantly happy place all the time. Yeah. But that's not the case.
Not at all. It's really not. I mean, it's happy at times, but for the most thing they worry about there is that people come to work at Pixar and they just assume that they've landed in heaven. Like, we're going to make great movies now. Yeah. And making a creative project is so hard, and you've got to move it, as Ed says, from suck to not suck. Like every time you're going to be in that first space, and it is really difficult. And so he ends up spending a lot of time telling kind of the oral history of the company's first evolutions, where they really were scrappy, tiny, did some incredible projects where they raised the bar, and sometimes maybe pushed a little bit too hard at times, but continually telling those stories, connecting to their kind of the oral tradition of their founding ends up being a really important way to get people clued into the idea that, hey, this is not going to be happy and smooth, but it is going to be rewarding in this different way.
Okay, maybe a few rapid fire practical things we can do to more effectively share vulnerability. You talk about the 3-line email. I love this one.
Yeah, it's an idea from Laszlo Bock, who runs an outfit called Humu now, which does HR. Used to be the head of people analytics at Google, and it is a simple email that you send to your team that is, hey, tell me one thing you want me to keep doing, tell me one thing you'd like me to stop doing, and tell me one thing I can do to make you more effective. So it's a really short email, but it's a really big signal to say, hey, help me get better, help me connect to you better. And what you find when you send it is that that'll be a little contagious too, because people will start to crave that kind of feedback.
I love it. And there's 2 others I wrote down are mark the ends of projects and hold an anxiety party.
Yeah. Marking the ends of projects, it ends up being, as we were talking before, there is this urge to just move on. We finished, let's go. And in good cultures, they always sort of use that time to pause and reflect and share the impact, each person's impact on the end's result, and in kind of a celebratory, affirmative way. And I know at Amy Poehler, the director, has a tradition where they do these sort of daisy chain toasts at the end of each of their projects, where one person will give a toast to someone, and then that person will toast someone else forward, and
nice.
It moves around. Just it's really a simple thing, and it's the kind of thing that sounds kind of just, oh, well, of course we do that. But in the modern world we live in, we don't do it often enough. It's so easy to walk past it.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. You're ready to move your business forward, but first, you need to find the right team. Start your search with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It can help you reach qualified candidates fast, ensuring your listing is the first one they see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. See the results for yourself. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
While the Whos of Whoville were laughing and eating, the Grinch from his lair sought to wreak havoc on their season. He thought, how do I ruin their holiday meals? A plan sprang to mind, which he enacted with zeal. Dill pickle seasoning on fries will make for a green surprise, and I know they'll be shocked with these loathsome odd socks. So if you want to experience the Grinch's mischievous meal, head to McDonald's and show him how you really feel. The new Grinch meal, now at McDonald's. At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
So, Dan, we've built safety.
Yep.
We've shared vulnerability.
Yep.
We're making progress.
We're moving ahead.
Let's go up another level.
Yeah.
How about establishing purpose? How do we do that?
Yeah, well, functionally, like, okay, we built, as you say, we built these two things. So we're connected, we're sharing information, but it leaves out this huge question of like, where are we going? What do we want to do with this energy? What do we want to do with these relationships and this information? And that's where purpose comes in. It's funny, I had an experience visiting these places, and I visited a lot of them for the book. But whenever I would come into a space, whether that was Pixar, whether that was Zappos, whether that was the Upright Citizens Brigade, this comedy group I studied, you would feel kind of quasi-assaulted by corny catchphrases.
Interesting.
Like, it just felt kind of cheesy, right? Like they'd all be using the same language. And actually, the Navy SEALs were kind of the worst because they always talk about how the only easy day was yesterday, and we shoot, move, and communicate, and we're the quiet professionals, which is kind of funny because it's like they can't shut up about how quiet they are.
Yeah.
But I began to see over time, like actually, that's not a bug, that's a feature. What they're doing is they're creating these kind of GPS beacons. They're sort of filling the windshield with story, language, symbol, image that tells me what's important here. We're so easy to distract as human beings. We're so distractible. And the idea that you can create an environment, sort of a high purpose environment, where you are continually filling that windshield with a clear sense of true north, what really matters, not just what kind of matters, but what matters the most.
And I love the power of language. What you're speaking to here, right? With these catchphrases, the power of language to establish purpose. And one of the greatest examples, I think, at least among the many stories that I've read about and heard you speak about, is the example of Danny Meyer, the great restaurateur. Can you speak a little bit to how he's employed these catchphrases and language to really build an extraordinary culture?
Fascinating guy. I mean, he started his first restaurant in the mid-'80s. One restaurant, very successful. It was fantastic and was very successful. So a few years later, he decided to open a second. And both of them, when he opened the second one, both of them started to lose their culture. Mm-hmm. And one day, a waiter at one of the restaurants insulted a woman to her face. And he realized, I'm losing it here. Really interesting. He would sort of not see that as just a one-off, but as a really important moment. Wait a minute. My staff feels free to insult a customer. I've really got a problem here. So he quickly sort of closed both, went off on a weekend retreat with his staff, and started building what you would call a mantra map, a clear set of phrases that adds up to sort of a map. True North was creating raves. Really interesting. The power of language, right? It's not making money. It's not like we want to serve good food. We want to win a Michelin star. It was creating raves. And then how do we do that? And he had all these other cheesy catchphrases like athletic hospitality, loving problems. He had one that said, mistakes are waves and servers are surfers.
That's amazing.
The road to success is paved with mistakes well handled. And it was almost like a country songwriter in Nashville, like just generating, my pickup in the rain. He's just generating these cheesy phrases. And he generates a ton of them. And then he goes on to kind of build those into the culture, build his training around them, build his selection around them, build his conversation around them, build his presentations around them. And it ends up looking really sort of cheesy from a distance, but when you look at it more closely, what he's doing is he's using the power of language to create an algorithm, a set of algorithms that helps people navigate. It's a navigational function. And I saw it up close. We were eating in one of his restaurants early one morning, and it was like this perfect, quiet morning. The flowers were smelling great and the music was playing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was this crash in the corner, and somebody dropped a tray of glasses, and Danny Meyer stopped talking to me and he started looking in the corner. And I said, what are you looking at? And he said, well, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to come together and clean up this mess and their energy level in the room is going to go up, or there's going to be some blame, there's going to be some resentment, and the energy level in the room is going to drop. And if it goes up, I know the culture's good here. And if it goes down, I know the culture's bad here. And it was just so brilliant, right? Like talk about a litmus test. I mean, it's not looking at your culture when things are smooth. Any culture can kind of go through the calm water. But what happens when there is an unexpected mistake? How do people respond? And that's when those cheesy sayings and those catchphrases started to really make sense, like athletic hospitality, loving problems, mistakes are waves, the servers are surfers. Like, dude, that's right.
And if you're a server, like, I don't think I'll ever forget that phrase, mistakes are waves and servers are surfers. And if you've just dropped a tray of glasses, you could immediately think, okay, I'm going to surf this wave, right? I'm going to turn this around. I also loved his phrase, skunking.
Oh, yeah. That's when somebody makes a mistake or gets angry and emits a foul odor that everyone can sense. And that can be body language, that can be expression, that can be actual words. And naming that is what we don't want. That is our anti-value. That is the opposite of everything we stand for. It's such an important thing, right? Really, because then it calls it out. Like, okay, there's the mistake. I don't want to skunk. I want to surf the wave. Like, you've given people not just language, but like an entire mental model. Like, that's what those algorithms are, actually. They're kind of a mental model delivery system. And it's great to have, because running a group, whether it's a restaurant or whatever you're running, you're going to run into stuff and you're going to need people, just like that flock of birds in the forest, to like self-organize in real time and navigate. And that's what those corny mantras are. I mean, they are navigational tools.
And language empowers us not only to scale culture, right? Because Danny Meyer can't be in every restaurant.
Yep.
But the power of this sort of indelible set of catchphrases and language that people repeat and embrace empowers him to scale culture, not just over physical space, but I think it can empower us to scale culture over time, right? You think of Steve Jobs is no longer with us, but Think Different still animates the team at Apple, you have to think, right?
Yes,
and so
right.
it's like, I really think since we are a show that celebrates books and great new ideas, it's just a reminder of the power of language in realms where we're less likely to appreciate the power of language.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think sometimes we don't take the time to give the thought and the reflection to polish it. When you go into Danny Meyer's office, there's a whiteboard, and it's filled with like attempts at good mantras, and they're pretty terrible. Like it's back to the Nashville songwriting thing, where it's like he's trying to come up with the new mistakes are waves, servers are surfers, mistakes are volcanoes, and servers are. And so he's continually, it speaks to the difficulty of this, he's continually trying to build better ones. You wouldn't think that would be a function of a good leader, right? Like, that's kind of a weird thing for a leader to be doing. Like, I'm going to sit in my office with a whiteboard and come up with kind of weird beat poetry about problems and solutions or whatever. And yet, because of this phenomenon that you're mentioning, that this, language and image and symbol and story move at the speed of light, and they get transferred from brain to brain directly over and over and over, are infinitely copyable. And so that it ends up being a really useful question for a leader to say, what is our version of creating raves? What's our skunking? What are we about if you had to distill it into 2 words?
And I imagine part of this creation of a language and a sense of purpose should be a team effort, right? It's not just leader down. I think this is something you mentioned that for Danny, each of his restaurants should have a somewhat different culture.
That's right.
And maybe they should generate their own mantras.
Yeah, there's this kind of misapprehension that all culture should be kind of, monolithic. Like if you're in the Google, everything should feel the same. But actually, when you get out there, it's a bunch of microcultures. It's a bunch of little ecosystems, and each of them has got their own feel and their own stories and their own vibe. I was at a tech company recently, and they were building their own mantra map. There's a group of about 10, and they had worked together for a while. And one of the mantras they came up with was, do epic shit.
I love that. I love that.
On the one hand, it's like the dumbest ski bum thing anyone can ever say, right? It doesn't make any sense to anybody outside. But inside that group, that was incredibly meaningful, right? Like it becomes like this lens, like, is the work I'm doing now epic? And it evokes all these voices and stories and shared histories, and just that act of creating it together, right? Because if you took the purpose statements of the top 500 companies in America, top 500 sports teams, and put them in a hat and pulled them out, you couldn't tell one from the other. All those big statements are the same.
Yeah, sure.
So it's much more about what can you co-create that really captures the relationships, the goals, the feel, the purpose of the people you work with all the time. And getting together and building that it's not just powerful, it's pretty fun.
Do epic shit. I think we need more ski bum philosophy as a former ski bum myself, in the next big idea club culture of in our mantra map. It's fantastic. So looking at practical things we can do to build culture, you got so many great tips in the book. One of them is develop a habit of meeting post-mortems. And you also talk about pre-mortems elsewhere.
Yeah, that little time travel that you do, it ends up being incredibly important there's a natural bias when you're starting out on a project to sort of think, this is going to go great, right? But it's really interesting to flip it and say, all right, let's flash forward 1 year, the project failed. Why? Like, what caused this project to fail? And you can surface all kinds of barriers and possibilities and opportunities in that process. And so again, taking that time to pause and zoom out and kind of ask that question. You can ask the same thing by flipping in and saying, well, it's a year from now and the project succeeded. What caused that?
And you also talk about doing a culture capture. What's a culture capture?
Well, it's a process by which you sort of put the iPhone on the stick and stick it away from your group and snap a picture of it, of where it is right now. You ask your group through a questionnaire, you say, what's one thing about our culture that we should not change? What's one thing that we should change? What are you proudest of? If you had one story to tell about our culture, what would it be? And you assemble all those responses on sort of a spreadsheet, and you start to bucket it according to different themes. And then you share that around. And it's a way of creating a conversation about where we are and then where we might want to go that ends up being kind of an energizing navigational process.
Dan, in the vulnerability department, 18 years ago when I got married, I invited a few folks that I'd only hung out with a couple times to our wedding.
Yeah.
And I said, I think you are a future good friend. It may be weird that I would like you to attend our wedding. It's kind of weird that I'm inviting you to attend our wedding since we've only hung out twice, but I don't think it's going to feel weird in 10 years because my hunch is that you're a future good friend.
Yeah.
And that I did that with 2 people, and they're both now really good friends.
Oh my God.
And it was awkward and vulnerable to say this at the time, but it's been well received. So I want to say to you, Dan Coyle, I think of you as possibly a future good friend. You live in Cleveland and Alaska, so I don't know when we'll get a chance to hang out, but let's do it next time you come through New York.
Let's do it. I think of you as a future good friend and a present good friend as well. So I appreciate the conversation you were starting and continuing. I think you're doing epic shit.
Thanks, man. Well, Dan Coyle, great talking with you today. Thank you, Dan, for taking time out of your writing and working with the Cleveland Guardians and coming up with cheesy catchphrases to be with us today. It's great to have you.
Same here. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Rufus.
Daniel Coyle is the author of numerous books, including The Talent Code and The Culture Code. His latest, The Culture Playbook, is out now. Before I sign off for the day, I want to bring on my producer and co-conspirator, partner in crime, Caleb Bissinger, for a quick update on what we're working on here at the club. Hey, Caleb.
Hey, Rufus.
So, Caleb, can you give listeners a little preview of what's coming down the pike on the show?
Yeah, so next week we're going to have an episode with an author named Jane McGonigal. She's a game designer, she's a technologist, she's a futurist. She's written this fabulous new book called Imaginable: How to See the Future Coming and Feel Ready for Anything, even things that seem impossible today. So really looking forward to that. And we've got other cool things in the works too. We've got a surprise guest host whose name we'll reveal at a later date. Our curator Adam Grant's going to be back on the show talking with Carla Starr about her book Making Numbers Count, which she wrote with Chip Heath. That's really exciting. So lots of really good content in the next few weeks.
Great lineup. And we'd like to know what topics you would like us to cover on the show. Should we explore the wild world of crypto and NFTs? Should we get into the future of democracy? How about flying cars? I'm kind of obsessed with flying cars. Rumor or reality?
Keep dreaming.
I'll tell you, Caleb, I think they're coming. Inside of a decade, we are going to be in flying cars, Caleb. Oh, yeah.
No.
Absolutely. It's coming. We want to know what interests you. We're all ears. Email us at podcast@nextbigideaclub.com. Caleb, on the subject of dreaming, have you seen the new Spring Motivation Challenge that we launched on the Next Big Idea app?
I have. It's super cool. Do you want to describe what it is?
Absolutely. So Challenges is an entirely new feature that we now have introduced on the Next Big Idea app. And I'm a believer, Caleb, in small victories.
Yeah.
Right? Little small accomplishments we can make in our lives. The Spring Motivation Challenge simply asks you to carve out 15 minutes a day for 5 consecutive days to learn from some of the greatest thinkers and scientists about how we can be more motivated.
It's so great. And, it's got Ayelet Fishbach, who we just had on the show last week talking with Daniel Pink about her book, Get It Done. Jonathan Fields, who's also a member of the LinkedIn Podcast Network and wrote this brilliant book, Sparked, about creativity. He's in there. It's such a great lineup. It's really worth trying this thing out.
I believe in you, folks. 15 minutes a day for 5 consecutive days. The Spring Motivation Challenge. You can do it. This episode was written and produced by Caleb Bissinger. Our executive producer is Michael Kovnat, sound designed by Mike Toda. If mistakes are waves, then the folks at LinkedIn are surfers. I'm your host, Rufus Griscom. See you next week.